Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Port Podcast, episode 294. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today to talk to you about video game stuff. We're going to be talking about one of the most exciting news stories for me in a very, very long time. Like, near Phantom Dust to, like, E3 show floor announcement levels, which, if you know me, that's, like, highlight of video game announcements for me of all time. So we're gonna talk about a really, really big announcement for me, at least. There is also gonna be some Sazh talk, the hit video game character Final Fantasy 13 Sazh, and some DLC related to him that I've alluded to in the past, and also a couple of other things, maybe possibly even some Love and Berry talk. What Love and Berry? Yes, Love and Berry, relevant again, maybe, possibly. We'll see. We'll talk about that later, though. To get started, though, here real quick, just to talk. So last week, I had mentioned that I was kind of thinking through Ko-fi plans and what to do with that. And one decision I made, like right before the podcast went live, was I decided to move forward with going ahead and setting up like a funding goal on Ko-fi. And what that funding goal is essentially a thing where you can donate, where you can replace like a daily salary for me, basically. So, you know, this isn't me like going like, oh, you like pay for me to work on a video every day kind of thing, right? That's not realistic, right? At least like nowhere anytime in the near future kind of thing. So what it really is just like if you donate the amount of what it would normally be for me to work a full day, basically, I'll take one of my, what would typically be a normal work day for me, and replace that with me working on a video full time instead. And right now, my employment situation is at the point that is a possibility for me to do. Obviously, if I get a full-time job in the future where I need to be there every day, that it will change. But for now, at least, that is something I'm capable of doing. Whether we'll get there or not is a whole other thing. But if you do want to support me on Ko-fi, that would be the way to do it. And what I like about this approach is, it doesn't, like, I don't have to make incentives that would ultimately kind of take away from the time I would spend on, making a premiere video or something like that, right? Because ultimately that's kind of the problem with a lot of the funding situations for me, is that like the things that I'm going to be able to make as bonuses through funding are things that will ultimately take time away from making the most interesting content, I feel like. It just means that I have to kind of find some way to give back to you immediately. So that doesn't mean that I will only work on premiere videos, when I get that Ko-fi number up. It's just a way for you to like kind of help me, spend more time on it, or spend more time to get something to you quicker, or maybe possibly make it better depending on how much time I can. The reality is that it is a chunk of money. It is a day salary for me, so it is a ways away. But that would be, there's kind of no downside, I think, to having it listed up there as a possibility. And worst case scenario, if we never get there and I decide, I can't do that anymore, or at least going forward, it would be more difficult. Obviously, I could kind of, take that reward that was already in there and just kind of do the equivalent of like, oh, I'll work like 2 hours on a work day on a video instead, kind of thing, right? So anyways, I hope that is something that would be of interest to you guys. It will definitely help me make videos better if I, have money coming in that's like a way for me to justify taking time off work to work on it, kind of thing. But like I said, it doesn't mean that I won't work on videos. It just means that I will be working on them the normal amount if I don't receive anything. So, feel free to support me if you want. There's links in the descriptions, link in the podcast description, all that fun stuff. And then also this week is a quick little bit of, home cleaning. I don't know what that is. I forget. There's like something that people say when they're like, oh, this is like the taking care of business part of the podcast of just getting stuff out of the way. The PCFX podcast launches this week. If you're listening to this the day that this podcast normally comes out, Monday, some of you are like, oh, it comes out Sunday. You're not supposed to be listening to it on Sunday, but it does come out on Sunday. You're right. But Monday is the official publication time of this podcast. And if you are listening to this on Monday, of this week, then you later today there's going to be a PCFX podcast going up on a different podcast feed. Just go follow, go to my website later today. I think it goes up at 6 o'clock probably Pacific time. And you can go ahead and follow that new podcast feed there. That's going to have the PCFX stuff in it. So feel free to check that out. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, that stuff should already be up, assuming there was no problems, hopefully. So, links again in the description for that stuff. And then hopefully you guys enjoy that. It is a episode 0 for that podcast, so it's kind of an introductory episode. But the things that I've been talking about with filler, I think are pretty exciting. I think the things that I think that will be really valuable overall, and I think it'll be a good podcast for kind of bringing certain PCFX information to kind of a centralized place in some ways. But we'll see what happens. Let me know if you have any thoughts on it. I would be happy to hear any feedback, all that good stuff. Video games, actual video games. Hey buddy, you ever play a video game before, buddy? We're gonna be talking today about a game I played recently. Technically it's a part of a video game, and that game is Sazh. That game is Final Fantasy 13-2, but the DLC is Sazh Story Heads or Tails, which is basically gambling DLC for Final Fantasy 13-2, which is something I initially ignored when I played through that game, because honestly, when I play through a game like an RPG, I don't really do a lot of side stuff in general, so adding in DLC rarely is super appealing to me, as I'm just trying to finish a video game at times. But returning to Final Fantasy 13-2's DLC, essentially 8 years after the fact, I was kind of ready to just hop into that game and check out what was going on with that DLC. And I recently took an interest in gambling games. I was watching pachinko streams and stuff like that on over the holidays, and so I was kind of curious about looking at what Sazh Heads or Tail was. Is what would a Final Fantasy, in some ways kind of story-based gambling game would be, even though, it is not a full game on its own. It's just kind of its own little segment of Final Fantasy 13-2. But basically, this is a game that features Sazh from Final Fantasy 13, who plays a minor role in 13-2, and he ends up getting, he's flying in a ship, and I don't know if they ever really give any context, but he more or less just gets whisked away to a casino dimension, where he's once again separated from his son and has to basically gamble to get his son back. So there's no combat in this DLC, so you're not getting any Final Fantasy 13-2 gameplay. What you are getting are basically 2 different types of card games, and those are really the main focus, although there is also a bonus slots mini game as well, where you can play the slot machine that, as far as I can tell, doesn't really have any real place in the story. It's just there to be hey, if you want to play slots and this is gambling DLC, here you go. I played it for a little bit and left it on auto for a little bit, and I never won anything, so I kind of gave up on it, but it seemed like it was kind of a minor attraction compared to the 2 main card games. So the 2 card games are poker, and then there's also a exclusive game called Chronobind. And initially it's a little intimidating, because if you don't know the rules of these games, and Chronobind is an exclusive game to this thing, so you won't know the rules, the game does not do a particularly good job of onboarding you onto these card games. There's just basically kind of giant text boxes with instructions, no pictures, no nothing. So a lot of times it just kind of feels like I'm reading these instructions, but I have no visual connection to, what these actual things are and how they'll actually play out. I'm just kind of getting the general concept. So the poker, we'll get into that in a little bit, but Chronobind, you're going to be kind of learning this thing from scratch, jumping into it. So it takes a little while to really figure out, but once you figure out, it is a really cool clock-based gambling game. So essentially, there's a giant clock in the middle of the gambling table, and on that clock, the bets land on certain numbers on the clock, essentially. So when you play a card, that will put like money down on that place that you played a card to. And basically, whenever a player gets the high card, so they have like a king versus like somebody's queen or something like that, right? They get the ability to move the clock. So you basically turn the clock around based off like the number on your actual cards. And basically what this does is it allows you to move the hand and then also kind of try to land on different bets and things like that. Or different, like what they're called binds is what they are. You don't have the ability to like manually put in a certain amount of money. The game just kind of automatically increases the stakes of the game as you play through. And when you are playing the game, you can actually wind the hand past the 12 mark, and that will basically increase the amount each bet is as well. So if you wind the clock, it basically increases the amount of money that's on the line essentially. And there's a little bit of like fun playing you can do in terms of like where bets actually go, because your card essentially determines like what card you put down determines where that bet goes. So if you have like 3 threes, you can actually play all threes at once, and it will basically put 3 bets on that 3 essentially. So you can make one number on the board be significantly higher than the others just by playing a bunch of the same card. And then also like you can play low cards knowing that you're not going to get control of the board, but where you want to put extra money. So when you get control of the board, you can go ahead and utilize that kind of thing. So what happens is there can be up to like 4 of these bets on each card, or on each number, which is like a bind again. And then the higher the bind is, like the more winnings you get from like landing on that bind. So when you're playing the game, you have to basically kind of do this back and forth between trying to make sure that you're like still capable of controlling the board itself by playing high numbers and things like that. But then also, knowing when to actually cash out when you get there, because if you land on like a 1 bind or something like that, you're not going to get a lot of money from that, so you might choose not to actually cash out and keep the game going instead. And there's like another element on top of it, which is like the higher card is not always the one with the highest number. Like if you land on a 2, technically 2 is the higher number now. But when you put that 2 down and you win that bid or whatever, you can only move 2 spaces, because the number of ways you can move the hand is only based off the card you actually played. So it's a really interesting balance between being able to win hands, making sure you can get control of the clock, and then also putting down numbers that actually will get you where you want to go on the board itself. So it's a really cool game, and while it may not be like as as much on the line as like poker is, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it definitely is like a fun way to kind of like play a balanced game where you're not necessarily putting everything on the line all at once. Poker is, more or less just poker, right? I mean, I don't think I need to really tell you guys that much about poker. I say that, but honestly, going into this game, I didn't really know how poker worked, honestly. So, if you need a quick rundown of what poker is, essentially, I had to look up some outside resources to help me in this case. So if you're coming in fresh, you might need to do that too. But each player gets 2 cards, and then as the match goes on, basically there's cards that like are laid out on the table, and the 2 cards in your hand you have to use to make pairs and like combinations of different types of cards, like counting up, or sometimes just using the same, like I think they're called the suits or something like that, the symbol on the card, and like getting a higher ranking combination than the other players. But you only have 2 cards the whole time, and all the cards on the table are like what everybody's comparing their 2 cards to, kind of thing. So and there's definitely like a more, like if you're trying to get the most money in this game, poker is definitely the way to do it, because it's like you can kind of control your own bet. You can raise the bid if you're more confident in your hand, or if you want to like hold, because your hand's not great, you can basically like bid the most minimum bid. Or if you don't want to lose as much money, if you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I don't have anything, then you can more or less fold early on and basically get out. You'll still lose money, but it won't be as bad as if you waited to later in the match. And it took me a while personally to kind of figure out the best way to play. Like I said, I haven't really played poker before, so I think it's something you just kind of more or less have to feel out. It took me probably about an hour, I feel like, to really get a hang of like when I could hang on and when I just had to fold and get out of there as soon as possible. Then obviously, at the end of the day, the other person on the other side of you might have a royal flush, right, or or something like that, which is, I think is like the highest one, which is like, I think all the like special cards like Jack, Queen, all that stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting, but I'd imagine more or less it's just poker. It's probably more interesting to me just because I haven't really played poker before. Now, one thing I am aware of being a part of poker, I will say, just from what I've heard, is bluffing is like a part of poker. Like, you know, you might have a really crappy hand, but with how you bet and bid money, you can kind of trick people to, you know, retiring early and things like that. And they do mention in the instructions for this game that bluffing is a part of poker in this game or whatever. They don't really give you details of exactly what that means or how you read that from the player. And I'll be honest with you, in the time I spent with the game, I felt like I never really could get a feel for if anyone was like bluffing, or if my bluff on certain things would actually get people to stop playing through it. It seems like almost always there'll be at least one person at the very end that it seems like you rarely can make everybody else just fold. They'll usually go all the way to the end and at least challenge you there, which means if you go all in, where you bet all your money all at once, basically, it usually results in you being able to, you know, go against somebody. There's not really like a fold that happens with that or anything like that. But yeah, there's like these little Sazh faces that are in the corner where his face changes depending on what's happening in the game. He gets excited, he gets sad, his eyes catch on fire, he's got glowing eyes sometimes. They're really funny little faces and stuff like that. But it's also a part of that chronobind game, so I get the feeling it has nothing to do with the bluffing part. It's just like a general way to like spice up the presentation a little bit. You know, most of these games, other than the fact that like there's a fancy clock on one table, you know, most of the games are pretty straightforward representations of a gambling game. And so the music being like, you know, exciting Final Fantasy 13-2 music that's reused from like the battle system and stuff like that, is kind of like the extent of the presentation. And then like Sazh, you know, going, like showing up and being like, oh, I'm feeling good about this hand kind of thing, right? And like the people that are across from you, they'll say things like, oh, I'm gonna keep playing till the end or something like that, right? So just like little jabs and things like that. So maybe a little bit more presentation than like, I don't know. I mean, I haven't played that many gambling games, so maybe a little more presentation than maybe you would expect, but nothing like really crazy or anything like that. So you have a limited amount of money in this game, and if you run out, you know, you lose essentially. I personally think as long as you're not like playing like ridiculously risky all the time, I think it's probably very unlikely you'll actually run out of money. But you know, kind of the goal is that when you win money from matches, they let you play in higher rank matches, so you can bet more money. But the reality is that there's not really a ton of reason for you to worry too much about the money itself that you have. I don't know if there's any way you can relate back to Final Fantasy 13 to like the main game, but in terms of like this individual DLC, like the only thing that matters are these things called fortune tokens. And these fortune tokens are things you earn from basically, they're essentially like from an achievement list kind of thing. It's like, oh, you knocked somebody out by, you know, taking all their money kind of thing, right? Or, oh, you played through a full game, or, oh, you won 5 games in a row kind of thing. And when you do that, you get these little fortune tokens. And basically, in order to beat the gambling DLC, you need to basically get 30 of these fortune tokens. Doesn't really matter how much money you do or don't have, although like betting at higher values does like unlock achievements, so you'll get more fortune tokens. And at the end of the day, you know, it only takes a few hours, I would say, to really, you know, get through and gamble on these tables and just like grind the tables to the extent that you can get the majority of the fortune tokens that you need. There actually is like a side quest in this game, or in this DLC, that's like an exclusive side mission featuring Chocobo Lena, I think her name is, or something like that. If you never played, or if you haven't played Final Fantasy 13-2 in a long time, like I haven't, you know, this is the lady that was like in the red dress that like was the Chocobo lady, and she's kind of weird because, you know, Final Fantasy 13-2 is a game about time traveling, and so she shows up everywhere in time, like, you know, in every time period, and she's in every dimension, and like she's basically like an item NPC kind of thing. So I don't remember if they really explain her in the game, game, but for all intents and purposes, she's kind of a mysterious character. So this DLC actually like gives her backstory. So you do get to learn about like why she exists, how she exists, in all these different areas and things like that. So it's kind of like a nice little bonus story on this. And she has like a cute little hide and seek mini game kind of attached to her, where basically there's like 6 baby chocobos around the area, and it's nothing crazy, but you basically just go around and you look for these chocobos. But every area in this game is like super small, so it's like not really hard to find them. It's more about just like the interactions that you have in these little scenes. There's like a cute little chocobo love story, I think, in one case, where there's like a chocobo that's like really cool and looking off in the distance, and then another chocobo is like admiring them, like, oh, he's so cool, kind of thing. And then like you have to chase them down, and when they're chasing them down, like the chocobos are just like flying around like with no real like animation. They move in the most like janky way possible, but it's kind of just fun and cute to like chase these chocobos as they fly around the screen. You just got to press the X button on them, and because they're moving around super janky, like if you press X on them, sometimes they'll like fly all the way across the screen before they stop to talk to you, kind of thing. So it feels super low budget for the quest line, but it's like in a way that it feels like somebody was just having fun being like, I don't know, let's have you do these like little things. More or less just like a fun side attraction, like after you've gambled a bit, go do this quest line and then go back to gambling, basically. So yeah, it's really fun and cute, and I think overall the DLC is kind of like fun and cute, despite it being like a gambling game with a story kind of thing. The few cutscenes that are here really kind of have that like Final Fantasy 13 2, or for 13 in general, kind of production level to it as well. So I have not played any gambling games with the story before, but it is kind of nice to have like these more elaborate cutscenes as you're kind of well, it's kind of more or less like the beginning, the Chocobo Lina stuff, and then the ending cutscenes are really the only one that are there. But it is nice to have this like story progression along with a gambling minigame. And I think all the characters they show in here, between Sazh and Chocobo Lina and the owner is the other kind of big guy in here, I think they're all like really fun and likable characters. And maybe it's a little lighthearted for the fact that like Sazh is trying to gamble his son back, essentially. So it doesn't really take itself too seriously. But I think it is kind of like a fun story for like a gambling game to be like, oh, you're kind of gambling to get your son back, even if it's not like super serious about it. So I know there are more like story-based gambling games out there, at least particularly in Japan. I'm aware of a few. So I would like to maybe look at some more in the future, but this one's like super cute, and I'm glad I kind of approached it when I did many years later, when I'm a lot more open-minded about that stuff, since I think if I played it at the time, I probably would not have appreciated it, and I thought it would have been like really grindy and kind of a cop-out to do that over like, actual DLC kind of thing for that game. So, but yeah, big thumbs up for me, especially if you're like really curious about gambling games, but at the same time, if you're like, hey, I need to complete, the Final Fantasy 13 2 story, but I don't care about gambling, I think you more or less could probably skip past this or go watch the 3 cutscenes on YouTube, basically, and then feel good about it. But still, very fun game, and I got to learn how to play poker. That's something. Anyways, so that's it for Final Fantasy 13 2. Sazh, heads or tails. I put heads of tails on this sheet, so it's a very fun thing. There is one more set of Final Fantasy 13 2 DLC that I haven't played, featuring Snow. I was not aware that it was like story DLC as well, which it makes sense that it is, but I think it just kind of is presented as an arena mode. So I'm going to guess it is more or less just like a series of battles featuring Snow. But I apparently never played it. So I think they're like $2.50 on a PS3 now. I assume in like modern releases of that game, the DLC's included. I don't know though. Final Fantasy 13, I feel like is a weird case where like maybe it's all just backwards compatibility based kind of re-releases. I don't think there's ever been like a official remaster. I could be wrong about that. But it's available and it's out there. So I would assume this is either a part of that or, at least fairly cheap probably. I think the original price was $5. So the $2.50 that it is now, I think is just kind of like a permanent price drop on PS3 at the very least. So, but yeah, maybe I'll check that out in the future. Jillian, it's your time. Your time to shine, Jillian. Although I feel like this question I have this week, I don't have any great answers for, I'll be honest with you. But it's Jillian's Corner. Welcome. This is the corner that exists from Patreon, where Jillian used to give us questions all the time, and she still gives us questions now to provide on here. So maybe in the future we'll have a more formal way for you to submit questions again. But for now, it is mostly just Jillian. Though if you do have a question you want answered on the podcast, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer those questions, and I'm sure Jillian wouldn't mind having a break, from every week me talking about the questions she has. But yeah. So Jillian asked the question of what are some video game logos you really like, and I sat there and thought about this, and I flipped through a variety of games, and it's actually kind of hard, actually, in realizing it, like, to look at game logos, because I have to go through my collection and, like, pull every game off the shelf and, like, look at it. So I didn't get through all my games, because it takes a while, I will say, and obviously I don't, like, necessarily need to own the games, but, like, I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head that was like, wow, game logo kind of thing, right? The one thing that came to mind, and it might just be because it is a fairly recent discussion that we've had here on the podcast, so it kind of showed up, is the upcoming video game that we've talked about, I think 2 weeks now, Buccaneer, which is that boat game that features a bunch of cats piloting the boats, and, like, you play anime ladies who are the captains or whatever. I need to look into it. I think Studio Saizenzen might be actually involved in that game. I don't know if they're, like, the developer, but yeah, that's the Umihara Kawase people, if you're not familiar, or what was that game? Blade Strangers was the fighting game or something like that. So anyways, I believe they might be the developers on that, but I did not look too deeply into that. I just saw their name attached to the project, essentially. But Buccaneer, featuring cats as, like, crew members, in the name for the game, the R is well, one, it's called Buccaneer, not Buccaneer, right? But the R, I believe, features a cat, and so the O part of, like, the circle part of the uppercase R basically is like a cat meow. If I recall correctly, I believe when the cat meows in the trailer, the R extends up and is like, when it goes up. So I think that is probably the most, like, distinct thing I can think of, honestly. Looking at everything else, I think there's things that I think the logos look okay or fine, but I don't know if I have, like, a real love for any video game logos, honestly. So, but there's definitely an art to them, I will say that much, but I don't know if anything, like, really, really ever jumped out at me in a way that I've thought about before this question. So Buccaneer, though, that is my answer. The one video game logo you get for that answer or question. So thank you again, Jillian, for your question. Again, if you want to ask a question, feel free to reach out to me however you want to reach out to me, and I will plug it in the show. And if people actually care, maybe I'll officially endorse another Patreon or another question format of how to get questions. But for now, Jillian is the question asker. So Jillian sits on her question throne. Some news stories. Big news stories this week. Big ones for me. Almost all of these are big ones for me, and if you're listening to this, maybe you, depending on how you feel. Like, I know some people are like, when you talk on your show, I think the things you talk about are interesting. I don't necessarily know if I care about them, but it's interesting to hear you talk about them sometimes. So I don't know if they're big for you, but they're big for me. One is actually an old thing, so let me just get this out of the way. So I found out about this the day it happened, and I forgot to follow up on it on the podcast. Solomon Program. This is the Switch game developed by the Atokadol and Oreka Battle people. They shut the servers down for that game. So I believe Solomon Program is still playable. So I believe you're able to go do that and still play that game, but I don't think you can play online, and I'm not sure if you can pull monsters, but I believe the game is still playable and progressible, and you can do what you want in that game, essentially, to play through it. I've not loaded it up myself to confirm that, I will say, but there was a lot of things that they're like, this mode's available, this mode's not available, and it seems like most of the modes that were not available were online-related modes. So maybe if you can just play offline, that game is fine to be played that way. But I really should check in on it. I haven't. The problem with Solomon Program, honestly, was I played the beta versions of that game, and by the time the official release came out, I gave them my money, because I felt good about doing that, given I enjoyed the beta releases. But, I had grinded through the beginning of that game so many times, 2 times, about 10 to 20 hours on each of them, each beta phase, that I kind of didn't want to do that whole early grind again. So I ended up falling off of it. rest in peace. I'm sorry. But, I wouldn't have stuck with it that long, I don't think anyways, but I would have probably progressed further if I had waited until the beta was done. But, it was fun to experience that game during the beta phase as well. So maybe I'll go back and check it out at some point, and we'll see what's happening with that. Maybe on stream we'll do that at some point. Just be like, what's up? What is still alive in this thing? So I still have like all 3 versions of that game downloaded on my Switch, and I believe all 3 still function. So I believe if I want to go back to the early beta, I could probably just grab that data. Honestly, I don't know how to pull data off a cart, but that actually might be something that should be preserved, is my Solomon program beta software releases. I don't even know how to go about that. I don't even know who to contact about that. If you have any thoughts on who do I contact about that, let me know. Anyways. So that's the first news story. Again, old news story. I think it was like New Year's Day it shut down, I think is when it was. So it's been a little bit. Dokapon Kingdom Connect. I'm actually pretty excited about this, though. I don't necessarily know if I'll end up playing it. So Dokapon Kingdom, if you don't know, is a series of, I guess you could say RPG, Mario Party style board games. But they kind of were designed in a way to make you aggressively, I don't know what the right word is. Like it was designed in a way that you couldn't really be friends with the people you were playing with. You kind of had to play competitively. Like for example, when I played Mario Party with my sister when I was a kid, like everyone played nice, and it was to make sure no feelings were hurt or angry, and so we all kind of ganged up on the computer, right? Because I think it was usually like 3 of us and then like a computer probably. And so, you kind of play nice, even though it's like a competitive game, right? But in the case of Dokapon Kingdom, it does not really let you do that. They more or less kind of force you to mess with other people. So it is a very difficult game. And I had a friend group once that when they are playing it, they like were seething at each other in a way that was like, oh, okay, Dokapon Kingdom was a bad choice for this. But anyways, they are doing a remake of the PS2 and Wii game, or a re-release. I don't know how you define this, but it has online support. So it's called Dokapon Kingdom Connect. So previously this was a local only game. Now it is a online multiplayer thing, which is very cool. I don't really know how that works given the fact that game has a very long playtime. Like it is a hefty game. So like, I don't know if everybody has to be present on online. If you save the game, if it locks all them in, I'll be curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, it looks like it could be pretty decent. It's Switch only, I believe, at this point, which kind of limits the number of people that probably would be willing to engage in that, I would say. And I believe it's physical in Japan. I don't know if the US has a physical copy that's coming, but I believe it's coming out spring this year, so it is coming out fairly soon. But I may, if I'm able to kick some people into trying that, maybe we'll do it. But I also don't necessarily know like how much I'm willing to go on my way to try to set up stuff like that. So I don't know. It might be one of those things that like, yes, I would love to play Splatoon 3, but I will never coordinate this, and I'll never find time if somebody else try to coordinate it either. So I might just leave it off my plate. But very cool that's coming back, and very cool it has online. I believe there was a, that one series, the Uwatomomomomo series or whatever. It's that one Japanese JRPG series I don't know anything about. But, I feel like Aqua Plus makes it or something like that. They had a Dokapon Kingdom variation of that game on PS4, I believe, a handful of years back. So it would have been nice to see maybe like a more modern version of that game come over, but whatever. The other big news story, well, this is kind of, I don't know if this is a news story per se, but there's speculation on, I believe 4Gamer and Inside Games. So there's some model, I don't remember who the model is. I probably should pull the article up here, but basically there's some like Japanese model, I believe. And, that Japanese model, basically had a very vague comment on her Twitter. And that vague comment basically said, and I can pull up the exact language here. Again, I'm using machine translation here. So, take this for what you will. But it says, that project I've been working on since summer is packed or something like that. And it's a little bit ahead, but look forward to it or something like that. It's basically the trash translation that has. So it seems like vaguely it's saying they were working on something and, please look forward to whatever they're working on. And then in the picture they post, it is a Love and Berry card. And so these websites, Inside Games and 4Gamer were like, Love and Berry, maybe it's coming back. So there's like some speculation posts on that. And I think I forget if I said something, but it's like something about the summer, right? Yeah. So it seems like how they're interpreting up is that it's been worked on since the summer, basically last year, is how they're kind of interpreting it. But it doesn't seem like anyone has any real information about what this is or what it means. Maybe it's nothing. My personal approach to most of these things is that it's probably nothing most of the time. And like maybe it's just like a photo shoot where she cosplayed as Love and Barry or something like that. I don't know. But it would be fascinating to see Love and Barry come back, because that market has changed quite a bit, since Love and Barry was popular. If you don't know, Love and Barry is like a 2005 arcade game series of card outfit games, I guess you'd call it. So, I mean, I call them fashion rhythm games because it's like, hey, dress up for this dress or this event you're going to, and then the dress plus your ability to perform the rhythm game ultimately amounts into your total score. So Aikatsu, Pre-Para, things like that. But Love and Barry has been dead for pretty much, I think, since to like the late 2000s. That kind of when it kind of fell out of favor, I think. So it'd be interesting to see if that comes back. Also, it looks like Sega retweeted the tweet as well. So it looks like Sega might be teasing it as well. So who can say? Maybe it's a new Love and Barry game. Maybe it is something not important at all. There's like a Skies of Arcadia tease a while ago, and it turned out to be like, I think like a manga version of Skies of Arcadia, which, is cool. Don't get me wrong. But, it's not a, remake or re-release or whatever, right? So we'll see. My also assumption is that if this isn't actually a video game, well, if it's an arcade game, obviously that kind of puts us out in a situation where, unless I'm going to Japan in that time frame that it's alive, that I can't really play it. But if it's a mobile game, potentially I could check it out. Potentially. Speaking of which, mobile games I could potentially check out that are Japanese. Okay. This is the thing I was telling you about that is like one of the most exciting announcements for me in a very, very, very long time. So if you don't know, Phantom Dust 2 is like top tier video game announcement for me. I've never played Phantom Dust, the Xbox game. And the reality is that I was not that excited about Phantom Dust 2 in that situation. But like Microsoft put it on stage and like treated it as like a premiere game. And they're like, everybody, Phantom Dust 2 is coming back. Or Phantom Dust coming back with Phantom Dust 2. And like everybody was like immensely confused. And that is like an amazing thing to have like Microsoft come on stage and say, hey everyone, this cult classic Majesco published Xbox game, we're making a sequel and it is defining the Xbox One. And ultimately that game got canceled. But like, it was just like, what? Why? Nobody. Look, Phantom Dust 2 getting announced is one thing, but like putting it on stage that way and having somebody come on stage and introduce it was like an amazing thing, because like nobody should have done that, and it was great. So I was ecstatic for that whole thing, even though nothing ever came out of it. This is a bit different because it's not like from an E3 show or whatever. Anyways, all the Phantom Dust talk aside, this is a game called Dragon Quest Champions. Maybe just Champion, actually. I don't remember if it's S or just Champions, but I was looking at this game trying to figure out what was going on with it, because it's really confusing. If you watch the stream, you kind of watch the beginning of it, and it just kind of looks like a mobile Dragon Quest game. You kind of go around, and it looks like it's kind of reusing Dragon Quest X assets and things like that. And you have like a party, and you're just walking around this kind of weirdly open environment, and it seemed really weird. And then like I got to the second half of the stream, and they get to like this town area, and then they put everybody in a boat, and then people launch off the boat onto an island, and then they start running around collecting stuff and fighting enemies, and then they start fighting each other, and then a circle comes in, and I'm like, this is a Dragon Quest Battle Royale game. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying that it was like outside the realm of possibility that there would be a Dragon Quest Battle Royale game, but I'm surprised it's happening. Like, I don't know. It's like, yes, that is an amazing question to ask, and that's an amazing thing to try to make. And like, it makes some sense of why you would make that way. But yeah, I don't know. It is just like all the pieces came together in like the most fascinating way with that. So anyway, so I'm ecstatic for this thing because it looks it looks crazy. So it is a, Dragon Quest Battle Royale, but it's not like an action game or anything like that. It is still the core Dragon Quest gameplay. So you jump off this ship. As far as I can tell, it's probably only one player per team. I don't think you can do like pairs or anything like that, or trios or whatever. So you have 3 characters that you're controlling essentially, but you're only really moving one around the map. So typical, RPG party thing. And you are, going around and just doing these Dragon Quest battles, and you do those battles. And when you do that, you like level up, and there's these like little growth balls on the field that you can go and collect. And I didn't get to see it in the video, but it sounds like maybe if you kill an enemy, you don't get the EXP directly. They drop growth balls. So like theoretically somebody could like camp you and get the growth balls from your kill or something like that. So yeah, it is like a RPG. And then so basically when you encounter another player, you can melee them. So there's like an action for every character, and like you can put your whatever class you want in like the front line essentially. And it seems like maybe they have different characteristics depending on who's in the front line. But you can do an attack, and if you hit the other player, you get advantage on them the way that, like, if any other RPG, you walk up behind somebody, or if you melee attack them first kind of thing. So I think like the Paladin or whatever class, I don't know the Dragon Quest class, but the Paladin like would sword swipe, and then I think the monks could like run and kick people, and then I think the mages like could shoot magic balls or something like that. So you kind of like try to catch other players off guard while they're doing things. And they actually talked about, they didn't show it in the footage, but if looking at the 4Gamer articles, they're talking about you might have the ability to like set traps, and the one they described sounded like a pitfall in like Animal Crossing. So you could set a trap on the ground, a player would fall in the pitfall, and then you could exploit that to go hit them, and then basically get a guaranteed preemptive strike on them kind of thing. So it seems really interesting, and how they handle like combat is like you can engage with enemies, but somebody else can interrupt your fight kind of thing. So on the field, if somebody's in a fight, it shows like a little dust ball of where they're attacking each other. And then so you can go up and like smack the dust ball basically and get in on that fight kind of thing. And so you can have basically up to 3 teams fighting each other all at once kind of thing. So it looks super fascinating, and it is mobile only, probably not unsurprisingly with that. But it is something that I really want to try to check out. So I actually went ahead and signed up for the beta. It's not a guarantee I'll get in the beta. I wouldn't be surprised if I don't get in the beta. I went through the survey trying to answer the questions best I could, but I don't know, it probably looked really bad. So we'll see. If it's just like a random selection, there you go. Maybe I'll get in. But I believe in it says you cannot record or anything. I mean, I will record, but I won't be able to post video or anything like that of the beta test. So that I believe wraps up here at the end of this week is when the actual beta submission period ends, and then I think the actual beta test is in early February. So I'm really looking forward to being able to possibly check that out. Because, right after First Soldier dies, like that's the other thing. Like this is like right on the heels of First Soldier dying. And, I love First Soldier. It is kind of traditional in that it is a shooter battle royale, right? But it like takes the Final Fantasy blood and like makes it interesting in very Final Fantasy-like ways. So I'm glad that they, asked the question of what does a Dragon Quest Battle Royale look like and executed on it, apparently. So one of those things that, probably will only stick around for like a year, but all the more reason to go ahead and check it out ASAP for me. And then when I, fall off, I'll stop playing, and then they'll be like, we're shutting the servers down, and I'll be like, oh, we're going to go back and play. So yeah. There's 2 things that are maybe a little concerning. Well, not concerned. Well, one of them is maybe a little concerning. The other one is just kind of like, I don't know if I'll check this out kind of thing. So there is a story mode in the game, and it seems like maybe they just kind of repurpose the main like area of the game, the main map, and you just kind of go around and hunt monsters. But yeah, they said like a story mode or whatever. So I think I probably will mess with that as like a training basically kind of thing, but I don't necessarily know if I'll play through the whole story mode or anything like that. It just doesn't sound super interesting to me personally, and not be able to read, it's going to make it difficult to enjoy any kind of story or plot. I get the feeling this is not going to get localized, so I think it's kind of now or never with it in that way. But yeah, I won't get the plot, and then the fact that I'm using my phone to play this means I'm not going to be able to do like machine translation really in an effective manner that would make sense at least. So at least for items and weapons and skills and stuff, I don't anticipate any issues, being able to navigate those menus and learn how to play, just by recognizing the Japanese characters and figuring out what they mean kind of thing. The other part is they talked about in the machine translated article I was looking at for 4Gamer, they talked about the gotcha mechanics or like the money transaction mechanics. I don't think they said specifically what it is, but I'm going to guess probably it's a gotcha thing. So, you give money and then you can pull basically, and I'm sure there'll be in-game currency they give you so you can pull or whatever. And it sounds like the gear you pull from there won't be just cosmetics. It will also be actual gear. And so what that means is that, somebody could potentially pay money and get better gear than you kind of thing. So, pay to win kind of thing. So they're talking about basically what they plan to do is have different rankings. And it didn't really explain like what this meant per se 100%. I mean, again, it's machine translated, so it maybe explained it and just didn't make any sense of machine translation. But they basically said that there's going to be like bronze, silver, gold, platinum rankings, and then within those, there's going to be like 3 tiers as well. And I believe the first rounds you do actually are only bot games, so you won't actually fight real players until you get like above the first rank or whatever. And basically, they were saying if you pull higher level gear, it will affect your rank in a way that it should isolate you up to either people who have paid to get up there as well, or people who have grinded it out and gotten gear to get up there as well. So it seems like that was kind of their answer for how that works. Obviously, the actual execution of that's a whole other thing. How many people are going to be playing? Is it going to be enough to even really? Is it going to be all bot matches? And if the population is low enough, do they start just mixing everybody together kind of thing? So personally, my feeling is I'd want the independent matches to not have any stat-based gear. Again, this is all machine translation, so don't take this as like 100%. Don't, come in my comments and be like, Square Enix, and be like, I don't 100% know. This is just the impression I get from the, the thing. That I was skimming through. But I'll give you my impressions of that game when it gets there, and we'll figure out where that goes from there. I don't really mind pay to win stuff as long as it doesn't get in the way of the video game. In a competitive game, though, it definitely can have a much bigger impact, I think. But doesn't necessarily have to be. It just depends on how it's all tweaked, right? So, anyways, I'm ecstatic for that thing. And that is probably going to be the most exciting thing for me to look at the very least. If I'm actually enjoy what, comes out of it is a whole other thing. I'm not a huge fan of the Dragon Quest battle system, but I think there's enough layers of interesting things on top of this, how they present that battle system in terms of being within a battle royale, that I think I would be, interested in that. And I think I will probably enjoy it. And so playing early and making sure I can get some games with actual people will probably be a big deal, kind of thing. So if I get in the beta, I'll give you an update, let you know, and then I'll give you my impressions, and I will record all that stuff, but I won't be able to post any video as far as I can tell until the final game actually comes out. So may keep those for myself for a while until Square Enix doesn't care, and then maybe upload those later to a site that I can like archive.org or something like that maybe. So that's kind of the problem with Babylon's Falls. I can't find any like footage of the early betas of those games at all. And also Babylon's Fall has the issue of like the video quality of those uploads are terrible because of the filters and stuff that the game applies. Just like it's destroyed in YouTube compression, which is a problem with me making a Babylon's Fall video and talking about the visuals of the game. So I'm trying to figure out how to get around that. I'm hoping using static images might be the best solution to that. And hopefully, be using a static image, the compression won't be as messy when I'm like showing, how it looks aesthetically kind of thing. So anyways, that's it for this week. Like I said, I don't know if I'm gonna be excited for anything else more than Dragon Quest Champions this year. I just love that is a thing that exists. So, Love and Berry could potentially get me really excited, but I also feel like Love and Berry realistically probably will end up being pretty close to Aikatsu and what's it called? Prepara and those games, you can play versions of those games. I have like 3 Aikatsu games that I need to get to still. So if Love and Berry is more or less just that, but a revival of that, then I don't know if I'll be like super, super excited. I'll probably at least try to check it out, especially now that I figured out how to get Japanese apps on my phone. But at the same time, we'll see. I mean, it might not even be a video game. Like I said, it might just be like, we did a Love and Berry photo shoot. Go spend 2,000 yen to buy this Love and Berry photo book with this model that, I don't know. Let's see how many followers this model has. How popular is she? 2.7 million followers. So she's popular enough, I guess. Is she more popular than Love and Berry, though? who can say? Anyways, so yeah, that's gonna be doing it for this week. Again, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about Dragon Quest Champions and Final Fantasy gambling games. Very Square Enix focused back half of last year and early this year. So we'll escape that at some point. If you've been around, you know how this goes. Like, we have like a whole year where like media vision is the theme of that year, and then like I haven't like engaged with media vision since, unfortunately. So keep thinking about Valkyria Chronicles 3. It's always on top of my mind. I might, it is definitely in the running of like maybe I should check out Valkyria Chronicles 3 after Somabringer, because like Somabringer is a super fascinating game to think about when it comes to Monolith Soft. But from a gameplay perspective, I'm not really loving it, to be honest. It's fine, I think. But, I think it's a really fascinating looking game, which reminds me, I did not set up my shipping for my Summerbreaker guidebook. I need to do that. So anyways, all that aside though, if you're curious about what we'll be streaming this week, or I guess last week I should say, we changed stream plans and we did the King of Fishing series, or kicked off a series called the King of Fishing. Hopefully there's more than one. But basically it is a series of me going and reviewing fishing mini games from various games kind of thing. So we did Sonic Adventure, Ocarina of Time, what was the other two? Animal Crossing Wild World, since I'm playing that right now. And then also Yakuza 3, the PS4 version of Yakuza 3. So I think it was really interesting, actually. I was kind of not expecting that much, honestly. Or maybe I wasn't, not that I wasn't expecting that much, but maybe I just didn't know what kind of conversations we'd end up having. And I think it was kind of interesting to think about what different fishing mini games are in different games. Because I think most of the time when I look at a fishing mini game in a game, I don't think about what that fishing game includes. I just go and like do it, and like, whether I engage with it further, I think depends more on convenience more than anything else, rather than, how engaging it is or isn't kind of thing. So I think we'll do more of those, but I think they won't be like entire dedicated streams. I think they'll just be like, oh, we just finished up playing some Final Fantasy Fables, Chocobo Tales, Square Enix all across the board here. Just finish up playing that. Let's go play a fishing minigame, or at least try to. That's the other thing, is like I'm pulling up old save files for games, and it's like, I don't know how we get to this fishing minigame. The road to fishing minigame must happen first, kind of thing. So that's why we only played 5 fishing minigames rather than 4 fishing minigames rather than the 5 I had planned. So I think that's going to be a kind of a trend, honestly, because a lot of these games I don't necessarily have save files in the right spot for. So we'll see, though. Anyways, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great week. We'll be playing some Final Fantasy Chocobo Tales later this week on Thursday. Again, if you're interested in supporting me through Ko-fi, would be great. I would appreciate that. If we get up to the goal amount, I will spend an entire day working on the premiere video, which is currently Babylon's Fall. That video is more than just about Babylon's Fall, though. It is about video game discussion as a whole. It's about Square Enix, and I think it also just in general games that are kind of maligned and demeaned as a whole when they came out, kind of thing. So also service game stuff, and like it's a broad topic video. I will say it is something that I haven't really done before, and it shows in the length of, like, I did the math and it seems like it's going to be like 40 minutes long, which is a long time. But anyways, if you donate money, I may be able to get through that video faster. But the big goal for me is to finish up the script itself before the end of this month, which I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. If I can, ideally I want to go ahead and record the audio portion of that as well, even if I don't edit it down entirely. At least record it. So because then in February I gotta really shift hard to getting the panel done that's coming up at the what is that panel called, or that convention called Level Up Expo. That's what it's called. So anyways, that's gonna be coming up, and I hope you guys have a great week this week, the end of January. We're not quite there yet. It'll be the week after, but we're getting there. Again, oh yeah, I'll check out the PCFX stuff. You should check out the PCFX stuff. Bye.